This is BrokenHeir. I discovered dark family secrets about my inheritance. The lawyer's office was so quiet you could hear the leather on the chairs creak with every shift of our weight. It smelled like old paper, lemon polish, and even older money, a thick, suffocating scent that clung to the back of your throat. The lawyer, a man whose face had more lines than the legal pads on his desk, cleared his throat, a dry rustle in the oppressive silence. I looked over at my siblings. My brother, Mark, a man who usually took up so much space, seemed shrunken, staring at his own hands as if he'd never seen them before, his face utterly pale. My younger sister, Sarah, was nervously twisting the strap of her purse, a repetitive, anxious motion that I knew meant she was seconds from shattering. I was expecting us to be sad, you know? I had pictured us sitting in that sterile room, remembering our dad, maybe even sharing a tearful, knowing smile about some shared memory. What I was not expecting, what nobody could have prepared me for, were the words that would act like a demolition crew to the very foundations of our family, and I hereby leave the entirety of my estate, including all property and financial accounts, to my daughter, Jenna. Mark's head shot up so fast I thought he'd get whiplash, his mouth falling open slightly. Sarah let out a little gasp, a sharp, wounded animal sound that was swallowed by the thick carpet. Me? I just froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins, a cold that started in my chest and spread to the tips of my fingers. It was in that exact moment that a horrible, dark suspicion, one I'd been consciously pushing down for months, started to click into place. It felt like heavy tumblers in an ancient lock, each one falling with a sickening, metallic thud, revealing a door I never, ever wanted to open. This wasn't a surprise gift. This was a coup. My sister hadn't just inherited everything, she'd stolen it. To really understand how we ended up in that room, with our family cracking down the middle like a dropped plate, you have to know what our family was like, or at least, what we thought it was like. There were 4 of us kids, and our dad, he was our entire world, especially after Mom was gone. He was a quiet, decent man who lived by a simple, unwavering code. He wasn't a man of grand gestures or loud declarations, but of small, consistent actions that spoke volumes. His core belief, the very thing that defined him, was fairness. I remember when we were kids, he bought a single, expensive chocolate bar as a special treat. Instead of just trying to eyeball it and break it into 4 pieces, he went to his desk and got out a ruler. A literal ruler. He measured it down to the millimeter and made tiny, precise cuts to make sure each of us got the exact same share. That was him. Methodical, deliberate, and above all, fair. He did the same thing with allowances, with bedtime stories, with everything. After our mom died, that quiet, unshakable strength was what we all leaned on. But as the years went by, he started to lean back on us, and we were so glad to be there for him. We were a team. We even made a detailed Google Calendar, color-coded and everything, blue for Mark's grocery runs, green for my bill-paying days, purple for Sarah's weekend visits with the grandkids. It just worked. My sister, Jenna, is the oldest. As Dad got weaker and more forgetful, she started taking on more and more. At first, it was an undeniable blessing. I remember her calling me one afternoon, her voice tired but efficient, saying, "I've refilled all of Dad's prescriptions for the month and sorted them into his pill organizer." The sense of relief that washed over me was immense, like I could finally breathe out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My brother and I had demanding jobs, and Sarah was juggling 2 young kids. Jenna's own children were grown and out of the house. So it just made sense for her to handle his day-to-day care. Whenever we'd offer to do more, to take a weekend so she could have a break, she'd just wave it off with a weary sigh and say, "Don't worry, I've got it. Honestly, it's just easier if I handle it." We didn't see it as a power play. We saw it as the ultimate loving sacrifice. We were so wrong. Looking back, the signs were all there. But they were like whispers in a language we didn't understand yet, subtle shifts in the family weather pattern. They were small, insidious things you could easily explain away because the alternative was too ugly, too monstrous to consider. It started with Dad not answering his phone. I'd call on a Tuesday afternoon, our usual chat time, and Jenna would pick up his cell. "He's sleeping, he's exhausted," she'd say. I'd call back on Thursday, and she'd say, "Oh, he just wasn't feeling up to a chat today, maybe try this weekend." By Saturday, I realized with a jolt that I hadn't heard my own father's voice in a week. Then, she started acting like a gatekeeper. We'd try to plan a visit, maybe for a Sunday barbecue like we used to have when we were all younger. She'd say things like, "He's had a really long week, and his energy is so low. Let's not overwhelm him." Or, "He's just getting into a new routine, and having too many people over will just throw him off completely." We figured she was just being overprotective, maybe a little stressed from the immense burden of it all. So we'd back off, not wanting to add to her load. I remember this one conference call so clearly, it's burned into my memory like a brand. It was a conference call between me, Mark, and Jenna. She was going on and on about how exhausted she was, how she was doing everything by herself, painting this vivid picture of her as a martyr to our father's care. My brother, Mark, ever the practical problem solver, jumped in. "Jenna," he said gently, his voice full of concern, "this is clearly too much for one person. It's not sustainable. Let's hire a part-time caregiver, just a few hours a day to give you a break." Her reaction wasn't relief. It was pure, unfiltered rage. "No," she snapped, her voice suddenly cold and sharp as broken glass. "Absolutely not. I'm not having some stranger in this house, going through his things. Nobody knows how to take care of him like I do. He needs me." We were stunned into a long, awkward silence. We backed off again. We told each other later that she was just fiercely dedicated, that her identity had become completely wrapped up in being Dad's caregiver. We didn't see what was really happening beneath the surface. She wasn't just managing his care, she was managing him. She was isolating him. Methodically cutting him off from the rest of us, one missed phone call, one cancelled visit at a time. We thought she was building a fortress to protect him from his illness, but she was really building a prison, brick by invisible brick, and we were on the outside, looking in with no idea he was a captive. Back in the lawyer's office, the silence stretched on, thick and heavy with unspoken accusations. It was my brother, Mark, who finally broke it. "That can't be right," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of raw disbelief and rising anger. "There must be a mistake. Read it again." The lawyer, a man who had known our family for 20 years, just gave this sad, small shake of his head. He looked tired, older than he had just 10 minutes before. And Jenna, who had been completely, unnervingly calm this whole time, finally spoke. "It's what Dad wanted," she said. Her voice was so smooth, so devoid of any genuine emotion, it sounded rehearsed. She couldn't even look at us. She just stared at a point on the wall somewhere over our shoulders. Honestly, the fact that she was so icily calm was more chilling than if she had been screaming and crying. Her stillness wasn't peace, it was the quiet confidence of victory. She knew. She had this all planned out. The next few days were a blur, a chaotic fog of angry, confused phone calls between me, Mark, and Sarah. We were like detectives fumbling in the dark, trying to piece together a crime we didn't even fully understand. We replayed the last year over and over again in excruciating detail. "Do you remember when she said he was too sick for Thanksgiving? Did she seem weird to you when she insisted on taking over his bank accounts?" We tried to get a hold of Jenna, desperate for any kind of real explanation, but she just shut us down with short, cold, dismissive text messages. "I'm grieving. Please respect my privacy." That was the final straw. It was the hypocrisy that did it. We drove to Dad's house, our childhood home, the house with the pencil marks on the doorframe charting our growth from toddlers to teenagers. The house we were supposed to be gathering in to mourn together. I put my key in the lock, the same worn brass key I'd had on my keychain since I was 16, and it wouldn't turn. It stopped with a hard clunk. My heart plummeted into my stomach. She had changed the locks. She was literally locking us out of his house, just like she'd systematically locked us out of his life. We were supposed to be grieving our dad, but that pure, clean grief was now tangled up with this ugly, bitter rage that made my hands shake. Underneath all that sadness, a cold, hard anger started to build and solidify. This wasn't our dad. The man with the ruler and the chocolate bar, the man who preached fairness like a religion, would never, ever have done this to 3 of his kids. For years, he always said that when he was gone, everything would be split 4 ways, fair and square. This wasn't his wish, it was a setup. And we were going to prove it. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. We remembered a home health aide we'd hired for a few weeks after Dad had a bad fall, months before he passed. Jenna had fired her out of the blue, saying she was unnecessary and disruptive. We had to dig through old bank statements to find the agency's name, and after 3 tense phone calls, we finally tracked down her personal number. We called her, just hoping she could tell us anything about Dad's state of mind back then. At first, she was hesitant to talk, clearly scared of getting in the middle of a nasty family feud. But as I explained what had happened with the will, her voice changed, hardening with purpose. She said she heard arguments all the time. She told us our dad was getting more and more confused, and Jenna would get so frustrated with him, her voice dripping with a contempt that chilled the aide to the bone. And then, she dropped the bombshell. The aide told us she was in the hallway one afternoon, folding laundry, and she heard Jenna tell our father, her voice low but clear as day, "If you don't call the lawyer and change the will to leave me everything, I will put you in that state-run nursing home on the other side of town, and I will make sure you never see your other children or your grandkids again." Suddenly, it all made sense in the most horrific, soul-crushing way. The isolation. The gatekeeping. The profound, deep sadness we'd seen in Dad's eyes that we'd mistaken for just the fog of old age. He wasn't just fading away. He was being held hostage, emotionally blackmailed by his own daughter. The inheritance was never about the money. It was just the final move in her twisted, years-long game of control. She didn't just take his house and his savings, she stole his last days from him and filled them with terror and loneliness. That was the dark secret. The will wasn't a gift from a loving father, it was a ransom note. That storm of grief and rage didn't break us. It forged us into something new, something hard and unyielding. It turned into cold, sharp resolve. We couldn't let this go. This was no longer about getting a share of the money, it was about getting our father's memory back. It was about taking a paintbrush and painstakingly restoring the portrait of the man he really was, a beautiful portrait our sister had vandalized with her greed. We had to expose what Jenna did and honor what he really wanted. We decided to fight the will. Our lawyer told us we had a strong case for something called undue influence. He explained that it's the precise legal term for what Jenna did, emotional and psychological blackmail. It's when someone in a position of complete trust, like a child caring for a vulnerable, elderly parent, uses their power to manipulate that person into doing something they would never otherwise do. He gave us an analogy that stuck with me. He said, "Imagine your father's free will is a boat. What Jenna did wasn't just suggesting he steer it in a certain direction. She boarded the boat, threw him out of the captain's chair, and steered it herself, all while smiling and telling everyone on the shore that he was the one at the helm. It's not just persuasion, it's a complete overpowering of someone's free will." It was, he said, a textbook case. The court battle was one of the single worst experiences of my entire life. It was like taking the shattered pieces of our family and grinding them into dust in a public forum. Jenna's lawyers were absolute sharks. They tried to paint us as greedy, absentee kids who only came sniffing around for money now that Dad was gone. They used our jobs, our own families, our lives against us, twisting every detail to look like we'd abandoned our dad and left poor, sainted Jenna to do all the hard work alone. I remember sitting on the witness stand as their lawyer asked me about a family vacation I'd taken 2 years prior. He made it sound like I was sipping cocktails on a beach while my father was suffering, when in reality, Dad had been the one to insist I go, telling me I needed a break. And through it all, Jenna just sat there day after day, dressed in somber black, a tissue clutched in her hand, playing the part of the devoted, grieving daughter who was now being viciously attacked by her ungrateful siblings. The mask of the martyr never slipped, not even for a second. The turning point came when the home health aide took the stand. Her voice didn't shake. She just calmly and clearly told the court about the threats she overheard. She had no reason to lie, nothing to gain, and her testimony was absolutely devastating for Jenna's case. She told the court about our father's fear, how he would sometimes cry quietly after Jenna left the room, how he once asked the aide if she thought he was a bad father. We also managed to find old financial planning documents from before Jenna took over his life, which clearly and meticulously showed Dad's long-held plan to divide everything equally, for ways. When the judge finally read the verdict, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom, ruling that the will was invalid because of clear and convincing evidence of undue influence, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt this deep, hollow, profound sadness. The gavel fell, and the sound felt like the final nail in our family's coffin. The court restored our father's original will, the one that split everything 4 ways between us, just as he'd always intended. So, we won. We cleared our dad's name and reclaimed his legacy. But we lost our sister forever in the process. There was no hugging, no sighs of relief. Just three of us standing on one side of the aisle, and our sister alone on the other, with a canyon of betrayal and bitterness stretching between us. That legal fight is over, but our family is irrevocably broken. There's a scar there, a jagged line through the heart of us, that I don't think will ever really go away. We got the inheritance, but we have to live with the chilling knowledge of what our own sister is capable of. It makes me wonder, what would you have done in our shoes? Have you ever had to fight for what was right, even when it cost you a piece of your own family? I'd be interested to read your story in the comments. In the end, we did what we had to do. The money is just money, it's been divided and spent and has become part of our lives, paying for mortgages and college funds. But our father's legacy, his unwavering belief in being fair and his unconditional love for all of his kids, that was the real inheritance, and that was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. It taught me a hard, brutal lesson about how greed and the thirst for control can poison even the people you're supposed to be able to trust the most. It can crawl into the heart of a family and bring out its absolute worst, most horrifying secrets. We can't get back the time we lost with our dad in his final year, and we can't ever forget what our sister did. All we can do now is try to move on, holding on tightly to the memory of the man our father really was, not the person his abuser tried to make him seem to be. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, share, like it really helps our channel grow. Thanks for listening.